One of the most tragic wives of King Henry VIII was Catherine Howard. She was just a teenager when she married the grotesque and large Tudor monarch, who was around 30 years older than her. She was just a young woman who had been treated terribly by a number of men throughout her short life, and she met a brutal and bloody end. On the 13th of February 1542, she made her way from her apartments in the Tower of London to the scaffold on Tower Hill. There an executioner stood armed with an axe, and in one swift blow, the head of Catherine Howard, the Queen, was taken clean off. She had been implicated in cheating on Henry VIII, and along with 2 other men, was executed. But one of those men killed for his involvement with her was Thomas Culpeper, one of the closest friends of King Henry VIII. But who is this man that slept with the King's wife? Join us today as we look at the brutal execution of Thomas Culpeper, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Thomas Culpeper was born in 1514 and was the second son of Alexander Culpeper and his second wife Constance Harper. His older brother would later go on to work for Thomas Cromwell, and his brother was known for being someone who was responsible for collecting valuable items and luxuries for the king and the royal family whilst they were at court. He was related to the Howards at the time and was a distant cousin of Joyce Culpepper, the mother of Catherine Howard, the Queen he would later have an affair with. But following the fall of Cardinal Wolsey and during the reign of Queen Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, Thomas Culpeper found himself gaining significant amounts of favour at the royal court. He purchased an estate named Hyam Park, near to Canterbury in 1534, and he was then a courtier for Viscount Lisle and his wife, and he was then given a number of gifts including a hawk, but then he was tasked with helping to get a hawk for King Henry VIII. With this he was invited to the royal court, and he was seen as a very handsome young man, and was a favourite of the king. It's believed that Culpeper had a significant amount of power over the king, as Henry VIII was close with him. For example, in 1539, he was able to practically ignore a scandal that gripped his family, as he was accused of assaulting the wife of a park keeper and then murdering a villager. There were murmurs that his brother was the one who actually did this, but following this his elder brother, who was also named Thomas, was then given a knighthood, and then through the king a pardon for this shocking crime was given. This shows that Henry VIII was so fond of Culpeper that he could make any crimes that would carry the death penalty disappear that Culpeper did. Culpeper was then given the title of the Keeper of the Royal Armoury, and he was then made a gentleman of the King's Privy Chamber. This gave him even more access to the King, as he would dress and undress him, and he often chatted with the King late into the night, and slept in his bedchamber after they spoke for hours. To reinforce his positive relationship with Henry VIII, the King dispatched Culpeper to go and greet his future fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, when she landed in England, to prepare for the marriage. This marriage did not go well, as Anne shunned the King, and did not realise who he was when she met him, and Henry VIII then spoke out terribly about her looks. But following this, Culpeper was then given Penhurst Palace, and further land by the King. At this time it was clear that the King was very fond of Thomas Culpeper, and the two were very good friends. But as Henry VIII was betrothed to Catherine Howard, a very young girl compared to him, the young Catherine then took a shine to Culpeper. This was in 1540, in the same year that Catherine Howard was made the Queen Consort of England. But things quickly turned, and Catherine saw more in the young Thomas Culpeper than she did the King her husband, who was now ageing and very unpredictable. With this, Catherine's lady-in-waiting, Lady Rochford Jane Boleyn, then helped to organise illicit meetings between Catherine Howard and Thomas Culpeper. The pair would meet together late into the night, and they would spend lots of time together. It was this affair that caused both of their executions. Culpeper, being so respected and liked by the King, was trusted and had access to the Queen's apartments, and he then came in contact with her ladies also. In March 1540, Henry VIII was away on a trip to Dover, and Catherine Howard was then left behind at Greenwich Palace. At this time, Culpeper asked Catherine for a number of favours, and they then met together around this time, and had private meetings and presumably relations in their chambers. Lady Rochford arranged these, and when the Queen was seeing Culpeper, only one other lady-in-waiting, Catherine Tilney, was ever allowed access to Catherine's room. On the 20th of June 1541, Catherine and the King travelled to York to meet the Scottish King, and they arrived in Lincoln on the 9th of August. It was here where Culpeper met Catherine once again for a secret meeting in her bedchamber, and then this continued on the journey, for example at Pontefract Castle. It was believed a letter was sent from Catherine to Culpepper, in which she wrote how worried she was that he was ill, and she stated, "I never longed so much for a time as I do to see you and speak with you, the which I trust shall be shortly now, and for a time as I do see and seek with you, and my trust is always in you that you will, as you promised me." With this, it's believed that Catherine Howard was genuinely in love with Thomas Culpepper, and it placed him in a strong position. At the time, Henry VIII was hugely overweight and burdened with poor health, and if the king died, then Culpepper would have been a contender to have reigned for the young boy king, Edward VI. He was also very trusted by Henry VIII, and the pair were very good friends, and he even used his position with the king to exert control over Catherine Howard, his wife. She finished her letter with, "Yours as long as life endures," showing that she wanted to actually be with him. But the news of the affair between the Queen and Culpepper attracted the attention of Archbishop of Canterbury Thomas Cranmer. He heard the rumours, and Culpepper was then held under arrest. The pair denied their affair, but the letter was found, and this was seen as incriminating evidence for it. With this, there was also a reference to Jane Boleyn, and then Henry VIII ordered Culpepper's arrest. In December 1541, he was tried for adultery, along with Francis Derham, a man who was accused of adultery with the Queen before she married the King. Catherine had not made any attempt really to hide the affair she had with Culpepper, and members of her household then tried to save themselves by actually testifying against her. The Queen was seen as a woman who seduced Culpepper, then a number of these private meetings were discovered, but under torture it's believed that Culpepper then admitted his relationship with the Queen. With this he was sentenced to death, and was initially sentenced to be hanged, drawn and quartered, which was a brutal method of execution. To escape this, he appealed to Henry VIII, and because of his friendship with the king, Henry did spare him being hanged, drawn and quartered, and instead he was beheaded by an axeman. This was seen as a kind thing for Henry to do. He was then taken from his place of imprisonment to Tyburn on the 10th of December 1541. He made his way to the scaffold, and there met with the executioner. He was a man considered one of the most disgusting traitors for sleeping with the king's queen. He was quickly beheaded by axe, but then shockingly his head was placed on a spike above London Bridge, to act as a strong reminder to the people of London not to cross the king. He endured a much quicker death than Francis Derham did, as he was spared the long ordeal of being hanged, drawn and quartered. It was said that as Catherine Howard was taken to the Tower of London for her imprisonment and execution, that she passed under the head of Thomas Culpepper and her other lover. She was brutally executed by the axeman in the same manner on the 13th of February 1542, as was Lady Rochford, the woman who it was deemed facilitated their relationship. It was a bloody end for 4 people embroiled in a scandal centred around sleeping with Henry VIII's wife. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.